Greetings, beloved, and welcome to Our Whole Lives Taking Flight. This webinar is in celebration of 25 years of Our Whole Lives. We welcome you here today and ask you to use the chat to just tell us who you are and where you're from, and to use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen for any questions you have today. I am the Reverend Amy Johnson, and I serve as the UCC National Setting Minister for Sexuality, Education, and Justice, and I am joined today by an all-star cast, y'all. We are so delighted to have this group together today to talk with you about this 25-year plus history of our whole lives in our respective faith communities. I would like to let you know that we have Ann Hansen. Ann, if you can just give a little wave, that'd be great. Ann is the retired Minister for Sexuality, Education, and Justice in the national setting of the United Church of Christ. And Rachel Ward. Rachel, can you give us a hey there? Rachel is the Minister and Team Lead for Gender and Sexuality Justice in the United Church of Christ National Ministries. And Melanie has some folks to introduce as well.
Yes, I'm Melanie Davis, the OWL program manager for the Unitarian Universalist Association. And I have to say, I'm a little verklempt watching that video, especially today. So I'm pleased for that. I would like to introduce Judith Frediani, who hired me, brought me into the UUA. Judith was curriculum director and then faith development director for the UUA, served as the project director and editor for the development and publishing of the original OWL K through adult curricula and the Sexuality in Our Faith companion materials. And Judith, you want to give a wave? And my current boss, now Bethay, is the Lifespan Faith Development Co-Director. Before that, they served as a UUA's outreach specialist and was a director of religious exploration in Florida. So welcome now.
All right. And in our background, we have our lovely tech assistant. I just want to give a shout out. She's more than a tech assistant, our amazing webinar host and just delightful logistics hero, Shiro, Andrea Burse. So y'all, 25 years of two faith organizations coming together for this life-saving, life-giving work, and the commitment that it has taken for these two organizations to continue that work for decades is really quite amazing and quite inspiring. So I hope that just looking at this group of people inspires you this morning. I'm going to start us off with a little opening prayer. And I'm going to use the word God because that's my faith tradition. I invite you, this is a prayer from our K1 curriculum with the UCC edition. It was written by Reverend Dr. Laurel Kepf, and it uses motions. And because sometimes we joke in the United Church of Christ about not being in our bodies, I decided that this would be a nice way to start us off this morning, to do a little something with our arms and hands as we're saying a little opening prayer today. So this is called the Our Whole Lives Prayer. And it goes like this. You put your hands in the prayer position. You say, "Thank you, God." You can say spirit or love or whatever works for you, "for making me just the way I am, for my body and all bodies, for my family," and hold up how many people in your family, "and all families. Amen." All right, I am going to turn the mic over to the one, the only, Judith Frediani.
Oh my goodness, that's the first time I've been introduced that way. Thank you. I go way back, and that's why I'm speaking first. So I want to talk about what it was like way back at the beginning and how it was actually came to be. In the beginning, there was a conversation. A conversation between the Reverend Eugene Navius of the UUA and the Reverend Faith Adams Johnson of the UCC while they were walking on the beach at an RE conference. The topic was About Your Sexuality, or AYS, the Unitarian Universalist Sexuality Education Program for grades 7 to 9. They were both AYS fans. Jean was very much involved in its development over 20 years before. And it was that passage of time that was the problem. Should AYS be updated, revised, expanded, replaced? Something obviously needed to be done about it. But the most groundbreaking thought they shared in this conversation was this, that the UUA and the UCC could partner in creating the next generation of comprehensive faith-based sexuality education. Unprecedented. Fortunately, their conversation, unlike many conversations, did not end there. By the time Jean retired from the UUA, the Reverend Makana Morris became the UUA's Director of Religious Education, and she worked with Faith and with the Reverend Gordon Svoboda, Gordy, to convene a sexuality education task force to assess AYS and to assess the current and future needs of the youth in our faith communities. I think it took 2 seconds for them to decide that completely new programming was needed. We're not going to revamp AYS, gone. They continued their work to envision the scope and the goals of a new program, including the need for multiple ages, not just junior high. And that was also a very important recommendation. So Sexuality Education Task Force 1. Now the task of creating the program, developing, funding, publishing the 14 components of the original OWL. There was 14 components, could begin. The Joint Sexuality Education Task Force 2, also called the Core Committee, was formed. It was a smaller, close-knit focus group that generated ideas, found consensus, and made hundreds, if not thousands, of specific decisions that had development was seated in the UUA's curriculum office, which I directed. When Makana Morris, my supervisor, told me that I would not just serve on the committee, but that I would direct the development of the program, I demurred. I wanted to decline. I pointed out that I had absolutely no background in the topic, and secretly, I did not have a lot of comfort with the topic. But Makana was clear. You're the curriculum director, you have to do it. Learning curve became very steep, and I began perhaps the most engaging, meaningful, and intriguing project of my career. We were asked today to talk about challenges. One challenge that I underestimated was naming the program. We brainstormed in the task force, we brainstormed in the curriculum office, we brainstormed in the RE department, we brainstormed with our publications office because they title things. And I'm sure UCCs were brainstorming where they were too when they were not with the task force. Nothing. We tried starting with acronyms. We even considered AOS, about as opposed to About Your Sexuality. That did not take wings, so to speak. We discussed whether it needed to have a catchy acronym and decided it would be ideal if possible. But nothing clicked, nothing felt right. Then in one meeting, someone said, you know, it's not just about sex, it's about our whole lives. And That's a very slight pause. We realized what the acronym would be. OWL, said McConna, and we all got it. And obviously it stuck. I don't know why we couldn't think of it earlier. To make was the cover art, and I want to credit Suzanne Morgan of the UUA, who designed the cover for the series. She did not go for the obvious, a picture of an owl, but for the metaphoric wing, suggesting lightness, flight, freedom, ascent. For the UUA, interesting our congregations in a sexuality education program was not a challenge. UU congregations loved AYS, and the excitement for something new was very high. I understood it was different among UCC congregations that did not have the same history that we had with explicit sexuality education for youth. For UUs, there was some pushback on the number of curricula for children and youth that we put out. Some religious educators did not feel that they could put that much sex ed into their programs because there's so many other faith development topics that they want to include in the little time that we have with our children and youth. It's understandable. And that is why we designed shorter programs for age levels that were not the junior high anchor, 10, 12 sessions or less. And we also made sure that many workshops stood on their own, that you didn't necessarily have to do all 10 or 12, say in the high school, and do them in order. And, you know, there were ways to make it more accessible. And ironically, others asked, why isn't there something for the second and third grade, the only age that we didn't have? We recommended Roby Harris's It's Amazing for that age group. And of course, Harris's It's Perfectly Normal as part of the 4th to 6th grade curriculum. More examples of the countless decisions we made on the core committee. One of our goals with the children's resources was to help parents be confident primary sexuality educators for their own children. That was, and I think still is, a challenge. Another challenge for us was the congregations wanted OWL now, if not yesterday. Everybody wanted to field test it so they would get it first. And we could not train and support that many field testers, so some were disappointed. The pressure was intense. The whole process was intense, from writing and editing to seeking grants and permissions to developing trainings and publicity and more. Much of the work had to be done concurrently to expedite publication. We worked together throughout. The process was very complex, very exciting, and very much a ministry in this unprecedented partnership between our faiths. It was a labor of love and justice seeking. Our journey took us beyond a professionally beneficial enterprise, which it certainly was, to a deeply spiritual and loving relationship. And I will treasure that time together always. Thank you.
Judith, thank you so much. Really, I just want to take a breath, because just thinking about all of the people and all of the decisions and all of the decisions that needed to be okayed by people who were not on the committee. And boy, can Melanie and I relate to people want OWL now, because we still want all the updates now, yesterday, last year, 5 years ago. So so we understand that and live and breathe that with you. And
Before you introduce, and Judith, I loved hearing the origin story. And I greatly appreciate the boldness of both organizations to take that risk to get together. And Rachel and Now will talk about that more later, but that is something that's really precious and important to us today as well. Thank you.
Indeed.
Yeah, and
Indeed.
I know Melanie and I are gonna speak more about what's happening now, but I did just want to lift up at this moment because you did mention the Sexuality Education Task Force that we just recently, the last 6 months, reconvened a group. We're not calling it a task force because we want it to be forever. And that is a joint advisory council with UU and UCC folks for this ministry. So a full circle moment. Yeah, so we have comment from the Reverend Mike Schinemeyers. Thank you, Judith, for your amazing innovative leadership and partnership in this work. And I did want to just say that I saw that Mike Schinemeyer and Reverend Kelly Bird are on, and those are also two predecessors of mine, kind of overlapping and in between Anne and myself. So super excited to see you all on the call today.
Thank you.
Anne Hansen.
Yes.
The one, the only. There is
Well,
one. And I know you have some information for us, and that your history with this predates you actually even being in the national setting. So please share with us.
well, I bring you greetings from Billings, Montana, where it's 3 below zero and I've got 10 inches of snow on the driveway. I stand on shoulders. I didn't do what you did, Judith, and I appreciate everything the task force has done. I just wanted to say that. In 1984, I started to work for the UCC conference in Montana and northern Wyoming. I'm an educator at heart, but I knew I didn't want to go into a school at 7 in the morning and come home at 5. And during the course of my ministry in the Montana Northern Wyoming Conference, the United Church of Christ published an H-SPAN resource called Affirming Persons, Saving Lives. It was a predecessor to Our Whole Lives. Although it didn't have the task force, it didn't have the values written down, but that's what introduced me to the importance of a faith community bringing in the concept of sexuality and spirituality. The first time I taught it was to a group of high school youth at our church camp then in the mountains. There were about 18 to 22 people there. I had a co-facilitator, didn't know I should, but I thought I can't do this myself. And it was very explicit. I said some words out loud I'd never said in a group setting. You can imagine what some of them might be. But halfway through the weekend, a young woman came up to me and said, "My dad's a minister, my mother's a nurse. Why haven't I heard this information before? I have made some of the choices I've made." Well, lights went off and my journey continued in ways that have improved my life, I think. And hopefully the message has gone out to people that I've met over the 12 and a half, 20 years that I've been doing this. When I got to Cleveland in 2000, I had been educated or trained in the use of the junior high, senior high, and elementary level of Our Whole Lives. So I did have that background. And I think it's so important to keep lifting up the values of self-worth, responsibility, justice, inclusivity, and hope, especially in these days that we are living in. It has guided my life for decades. But when I got there, I realized that the United Church of Christ had for at least 4 decades uplifted the idea of churches becoming open, affirming. We ordained our first Protestant openly gay person who became a very good friend, Bill Johnson. I realized that we had the foundation set, but we didn't have the mechanism to get it out to the churches. So Faith Johnson, who was on the task force, tapped me on the shoulder and said, Ann, I want you to take over my position. I went, holy crap, what are you thinking? And fortunately, I was at an age, I was 59 at the time. And I decided, no, this is something I want to do. I don't want to look back when I become 84, which I will tomorrow, and say, I wish I would have done it. So I packed up my car, sold my house. My kids were all in favor of it, landed in Cleveland to 17 boxes in my office that Faith Johnson left, the records of our whole lives. And she's a giant in my life. But I realized that because of the foundation that had been set, that there were doors that opened, but boy, some of them were really hard to open, because what the heck are we doing talking about sex in the church? So we had to go back, and I was joined by many, many people that are on this call today that walked with me, held me up when I needed it. But there was only one person that walked out of anything I ever did. And that was a person that asked me, would Jesus teach this crap? And I explained to them after I took a deep breath, Jesus loved children. Jesus was an embodied human being. Yes, I think Jesus would have approved of this, and he would have been a heck of a teacher. So that's the kind of personality I've brought into all the sessions. It's let's be honest with each other, sit patiently. But the thing that I appreciate most about our whole lives are the people that came to the trainings, came to the workshops, came to the presentations with their whole bodies. And some of them were filled with shame and fear. And to have the privilege and the honor of being one of the facilitators that was in a training with these people was something that is very holy to me. Tears, laughter galore, honesty. The first time that a person has usually, most of the people have ever been contained in a circle of trust about their sexuality. I've had doctors, lawyers, pastors come up to me and say, this should be taught everywhere, in medical school, in seminary, and outside. Well, I agreed 100%. When it came time for me to retire, I was ready to. And I knew that the program had people that would carry it forward. One of those was Amy Johnson, who pestered the heck out of me for years because she hadn't been trained as a trainer. Amy, slow down. We don't have the money right now. But Ann, I need to, well, thank God I listened. And then there's a woman, Sue Ellen Bronlin, one of the first people I trained, left me a message right after I moved to Cleveland saying, I'm so excited about this, our whole lives. I need to talk to you right now. Here's my cell phone number. Here's my pager number. So I thought, oh boy, here we go. I called her and all I heard was a beep, 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 beep. She was an anesthesiologist in surgery, and she picked up her pager because she wanted our whole lives. So that was a passion that I've tried to carry forward as I've been with people. And in closing, I just want to say our whole lives values are the original DEI, diversity, equality, and inclusion. So we were way ahead of our time. Every person that I was with, every person I've worked with, every person I've trained, every person that has come into my lives through our whole lives has been a blessing. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Anne. And it is 1000% true that I bugged the heck out of her. And I'm really glad I did. Oh my goodness, yes. And Ann Hansen did not leave me 17 boxes, but there was an office that I did need to go through, and there was a lot of stuff in there that is archived, and that is also some of it in my office right now. Please see the comment from Mike Schoenemeyer for you, Ann. So much deep
Oh,
esteem.
oh, I could have told stories about Mike and me, Amy and me. I can't go there right now.
Well,
Don't have enough time.
There's so many. There are so many.
I think, Anne, I would like to lift up the fact that, you know, you were one of the OWL trainers that always got amazing evaluations and feedback from your trainings. And it seems a good time to express gratitude for all of our OWL trainers over the years. These people put in many days training to be trainers. And we put them through a fairly rigorous selection process, and they do not get corporate pay rates to do the work that they do. They do get paid, but we just couldn't do this without them. And Amy and I work as partners with them so that they can call us at any time during a training and bounce ideas or concerns off us. And we just love you all. Maybe what are we up to? We're almost 80 trainers now, in Canada, the Philippines, the United States, Sweden, Trinidad and Tobago. Am I missing any place, Amy?
That's our official trainer list right now, but yeah, we love you all so much. Wow. Okay. Deep breath. So we are going to, with that foundation there, which is robust and lovely and beautiful. And thank you so much, Judith and Anne, for that. And for, I think at this moment, this particular moment right now, it's so important to remember our history and our ancestors and where we've been, and the deep commitment of the United Church of Christ and the Unitarian Universalist Association to this ministry. So that is my segue over to now and Rachel. And, you know, I don't think we did talk about who's going to go first, or if you just want to have a conversation together about the commitment of the UCC and the UUA to OWL. And the sort of intersections with our mission and our faith formation and justice. So I'll just turn it over to the ones and onlys, Rachel and now.
The theys and the thems.
Yes, I love that. I mean, we could have an open conversation
Yeah.
together.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a place of resonance that I want to lift up is that this right now, if you're watching this in real time or later, this is an example of justice being a long arc, but worth it. The reality of these stories and narratives and 25 years of changing and saving lives is worth seeing as an example that justice is always possible, love is always possible, and we get to be in that work with God or spirit or however you approach a higher power, and it's transformative. And so now, and I get the humbling honor to continue that work and to honor that legacy in seeking transformative justice that celebrates all bodies. And I'll add hopes for bodies and for people to be embodied each day of their life as well. Now we've been in community together for almost 2 years. And we've
I'm
really
glad you
worked.
have a better sense of time than I do.
I know, time is weird, but we've been working together to kind of envision our present moment and our future growth together to keep growing upon what started this relationship. Maybe we can talk about some of that a little bit.
Yeah, and I just want to touch on, I think, Anne, it was you that named a circle of trust. I feel that, you know, Rachel, you and I have moved into this circle of trust of stewardship for this program that has been built for us, and that we are being called into that circle. And I'm so grateful for that honor. And yeah, one of the things that Amy and Melanie helpfully provided a list of things that we could touch on, but
Yes.
in terms of our organizational commitment and, you know, preparing for this webinar, I'm like, okay, list of things. I can jot these down and have them ready. But, you know, just listening to Judith and Anne and also just the presence of Melanie and Amy always just bring me to recognize the breadth of stewards that we have as part of OWL. And of course, we can talk about it from a you know, this is your job, or, you know, we work for these organizations and here are the management levels and here are the leadership commitments, which are certainly important, and I'm honored to be a part of that. And I just want to lift up, you know, especially from the UU side, you know, the religious educators who for years have used this material, right? And the lay leaders who have been trained as facilitators and have done this work in their congregations and in their communities and have, you know, done their own brainstorming of ways that they can expand OWL, you know, beyond the walls of even their own congregations, out into their communities, is just an honor. And yes, you know, there are things that we have been, Rachel, you and I have been committed to helping to facilitate these commitments from our organizational leadership in terms of, you know, signing an updated memorandum of understanding and publications agreement. And y'all don't know the level of document editing and swapping back and forth that happened. But you know, that's our responsibility and our honor, I think, to be able to do that, to ensure that we have another 25 years of OWL. That and I was also reflecting on personally, you know, having grown up and not gotten comprehensive sexuality education until, you know, I was in college. And, you know, I'm speaking as a early 40-ish person. And, you know, it should have been. And now, you know, I still live and work in Florida. And, you know, just to have this time, reflecting on this time and the regression that we've seen in our the education in our schools, and the continuing importance of us to recommit and to make this more and more available through our faith communities.
Yeah, I'll say that the relationship that we have been building together is so beautiful. And the tapestry that we get to weave from the foundations of those before us has informed how we've come back together and creating and thinking about an advisory council of UUA and UCC folks. Within the United Church of Christ, Amy has a UCC advisory council as well, so that we can be deeply listening across the denomination and hearing the needs and having input from those who are doing this work at the local level. It takes all of us to be able to make movement and change possible. And from paperwork to editing, from what seems like a mundane, is a huge movement piece, a huge direction towards growth. This moment, I think, you know, I've said this a lot in spaces. I said this to Amy when her and I met after the results of the United States election. Everything has changed and nothing has changed. What we do and what we offer is critical, and we know that. And we believe that each person has the God-given right, from my perspective of language, to be in their body, to know about their body, grow in their body, and be in love with their body, and to be in consensual, safe relationships with other bodies. So our commitment at the UCC is obviously to seeing sex education be available. and ensuring that we're offering that holistic, comprehensive, inclusive sexuality education that goes beyond. I really appreciate, Judith, you saying it's not just about sex, it's about our whole lives, and how we got to the name. It is about our whole lives. And something I'm celebrating, and I don't want to steal too much of Amy and Melanie's conversation, but you know, we've been working really hard to have 25 trainings this year in celebration of 25 years of OWL. And I think we're at 22. So, and Amy's trying to confirm you can do it when you all speak, but we know that this moment is a hinge moment. But I also have so much hope because we have exactly what we need. And the call and response here, really from the wider swath of the church and from community, is just to say yes and show up and to make space for people to be and to grow together. And it really is just a joy to do that work with Now and with Melanie and with Amy. And I'm so proud of this continued partnership, and doing justice together. Yeah.
Thank you both so much. I was going to jump in. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you. Now, the 25 trainings is a UCC initiative where we have 22 on the calendar right now. UCC hosted Our Whole Lives trainings, and another couple in the works. So we're going to get there. We actually are up to, I think, close to 60 trainings a year, which is pre-pandemic levels, which is fantastic. Between our online trainings, which are jointly sponsored between the UUA and the UCC, and other in-person trainings. So there are many trainings. There's so many opportunities, and there's some that aren't even on our calendars that schools do and organizations do. So we are deeply grateful for small groups of people working to change the world, as I think Margaret Mead would say. There's so much that Melanie and I could say right now.
No, I would like to start by saying we are the public faces of Our Whole Lives, but it offers both safety and energy and inspiration to work for organizations that are as committed as the UCC and the UUA are to this work. We couldn't do this without organizational commitment, and the values and the not just the commitment to just the sex ed part, but to it being part of faith formation and really holding that role of Our Whole Lives within that framework. So that's important to us. Amy, did you want to talk about what's going on now with OWL?
Yeah, I do. And before I get into specifics, I know there's a question in the Q&A, and we'll get to that. But I just kind of want to also like frame this idea that I've been in circles recently where people are, I think many people are anxious and even afraid, and understandably so. And I'm not immune from that. And I think that sometimes that gets expressed by, but what are you doing? And what I want to say is similar to what you're saying, Melanie. Like, even though Melanie and I are the front facing people in our organizations for Our Whole Lives right now, I just want to validate again how wide and broad the community is, and that we each individually and collectively remember that there are a lot of people. There are hundreds and thousands of people doing this work every day in their communities, in their faith communities, as part of what they believe their faith calls them to do. And that is important, even if it's not on the front page of the New York Times, and probably better that it's not on the front page of the New York Times right now. So, so let's all just remember that and hold that in our hearts. We are doing a lot, y'all. We're doing a lot. We have 7 levels of curriculum, and we are constantly, some of you have heard this before, and we are constantly in some state of revision about those. So I don't want to give timelines or get into too much detail, but we do have a UCC and a UUA version of Our Whole Lives for K1, and we're moving ahead with as things are published for that to be the case for the rest of the levels of Our Whole Lives. The next one that will come out will be Our Whole Lives to Our Knowledge, the best of our knowledge. The next one that will come out will be Our Whole Lives for grades 10 through 12. We're also working on updates for Our Whole Lives for young adult, and have begun the process for a third edition of Our Whole Lives for grades 7 through 9, and have plans to work on a third edition of Our Whole Lives for grades 4 through 6 later this year. So as you can see, we are always in a state of what's next, how can we update this? Yes, we know it's dated. Thank you so much for sharing your feedback. Yes, we're on it. Yes, we have limited resources, and we're doing as much as we can to keep it, because we know that people want this and need this very much. Melanie, do you want to talk about the new format a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, and I just wanted to add, we also have our Owl for Older Adults now, which it gets great reviews. So go out and use it. So many of our congregations have a lot of older adults, so they can be champions. And yeah, so one of the issues that we deal with is it's not just engaging authors and field testing and then revising, but we also work with this process of production. And our production director came up with this lovely new format, which is amazing. And it makes things both easier for facilitators and more complex on the production end. So that's one of the things that we deal with. And what's going on is that we used to have 2 books. And for 7 to 9 currently, for 4, 6, 7 to 9 and the other levels, we still have 2 books. But K1 is now merged, Owl and Sexuality and Our Faith. So there are 3 versions of it. There's Our Whole Lives Secular, there's Our Whole Lives UCC, and Our Whole Lives UU. And the faith components are seamlessly integrated throughout the books, with new, time frames. Like if you do this, this will add 10 minutes or so, but it makes it much easier to incorporate the faith material. And so the next one you'll see in that format is 1012. We are finalizing the faith versions of that currently. And then young adult will also be in this new format. And it's just been really fun to work on, just seeing how our contributors enhance or enrich, I wouldn't say enhance, they enrich the material by putting the secular sex ed material into the context of our different faith traditions.
Yeah.
But one of the benefits of that is we have already field tested this with K1, is if there is a need to change something because a link is broken or facts change or whatever, we can really rapidly make those changes, create a PDF of that users can then download and insert into their binder. Same numeric order and format. So it's just a way of not waiting 3 or 4 years for a new publication to get those important updates.
Yeah, and so our hope is that eventually we'll have a robust page where anytime they're gonna offer Our Whole Lives can just go check and make sure they have all the updated information. That's the most recent that we have. We're a ways from having that for all the levels, but we're working on it, and we appreciate your grace and patience as we do. There are so many things going on with Our Whole Lives, and some of them are focused on our 25 years celebration. We decided to capitalize on 2025 as a 25 years celebration of Our Whole Lives. And we are doing some special things. Later today, we're meeting about getting a new logo, and we are going to have some special events both at the UUA General Assembly and the United Church of Christ General Synod this summer. There'll be receptions and hopefully some workshops and other things going on there. I want to just say that one of my sons did gift me with an inflatable owl suit for Christmas. So you may see that if you come to GA or or General Synod. Still trying to find volunteers to wear it though, so we'll see.
Yeah.
We
And I want to say we will on Friday at general session at GA, we will have main stage time. So we're creating a little video so people can learn more about OWL. And at 4 o'clock on Friday, come join us in the exhibit hall for some cake and celebration for anybody who's at General Assembly.
Yeah, so and another thing that we're doing, like I said earlier, we have the Joint Advisory Council and other infrastructure that we're putting together is just so helpful to have those touch base moments. There are several things happening in different communities around Our Whole Lives. There are many churches that are reaching out to either Melanie or myself or both of us saying, how can we provide this in our communities? And that's certainly something that you can do. I think just one pro tip here, and we could do a whole webinar on this, and that is that I think you need to have a relationship with whoever you're wanting to be in relationship with, offering Our Whole Lives before starting sexuality education with a group. It's good to have a relationship with them already. I saw somebody pop up in the chat. Owl is in Canada. The
It
Canadian.
is in Canada. If you might want to introduce your friends who don't know about OWL to the Canadian Unitarian Council, and they can connect folks to programs in congregations throughout Canada.
Yeah, and we also have been doing some work, each of us and both of us, with military chaplains. As you can imagine, that's kind of a little bit subdued at the moment, waiting to see what some of the decisions are going to be, but we're still in conversation about that and how we can best support them in that work. And there are plenty of other, even if you're not UCC or UUA and you have another faith tradition, or you know other people in other faith traditions that are interested, our trainings are open to anyone. And we often have people who are Presbyterian, Lutheran, Jewish, other faith traditions who come to our trainings and bring it back to their individual churches. I don't want to it's not a secret, but we're working on a statement about the United Methodist Church and our work with them. That is another denomination, though, that is working on how to provide denominational support with Our Whole Lives. So, Melanie, you want to talk about a couple other things?
Yeah, one of the things I think that obviously we take pride in Our Whole Lives in our churches and congregations, but also it's used in schools, sometimes in whole, like in private schools, have more flexibility in their scheduling. Sometimes in public schools, it's used in smaller, like adaptations. But it's not just a faith thing. It's really respected among the sexuality education community. And for that reason, we're in conversation frequently with other organizations, advocacy organizations, community sexuality education organizations. They look at OWL and say, we want to do that. We want to partner with you. And in this time, we've mentioned this in several different ways, but in this time where school-based sex ed is being eliminated or drastically changed, Our Whole Lives offers something that no one else is going to be able to offer. And so congregations can reach out into their communities and make those partnerships. As Amy said, don't just say, let's do this. build the coalition first. And those advocacy organizations that we're talking to have that expertise, and we can make some connections there. OWL is so respected that we constantly get requests to use it around the world. It's not always the best choice for some communities. What we try to do is to see if there are options that are specifically written for different cultures, because we're not forcing Our Whole Lives on anybody in any way. But when they choose Our Whole Lives, we're happy to help them. I learned last year that the University of Eswatini has been using Our Whole Lives to try to decrease intimate partner violence. And it was very exciting. And the students themselves found it so helpful, they have requested to use Our Whole Lives in its entirety. So things like that are very affirming for us to hear, that people are finding creative ways to use this fabulous, fabulous curriculum that we have. And that wouldn't happen if it wasn't so strong here and in Canada. And it's proved how effective it is. One of the things that Amy and I are really committed to is constantly keeping up to date, engaging experts who have expertise that we don't necessarily. We're both sex educators and curriculum developers, but there's specialized medical information that we engage people to keep us up to date with. And the other commitment that we have is always a strengthening, continuing effort to make it more anti-racist and more anti-oppressive and more multicultural, so that we are being a healing opportunity for people who encounter Our Whole Lives and sexuality education, because very often they haven't had that opportunity elsewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, just so you are aware, Melanie and I are working with other advocacy organizations to see how we can impact and have more people be available to do trainings as they're able, which kind of brings us to a couple questions. I'm going to finish it in the chat. Somebody asked about putting the link to the curriculum so that I will say out loud, since the chat isn't available on the recording, that you can purchase any of the Our Whole Lives curriculum through either UCC Resources, which is at www.uccresources.com, or the UUA bookstore, which I believe is
uuabookstore.org.
Yeah. There's a question in the Q&A. First of all, just thank you again, everyone. Thank you. There's a question in the Q&A about concerns about some of the political climate right now, and things that are being that there's some concerns about sexuality education in general, and particularly issues around trans folks, and some targeting of folks that are teaching sexuality education. And so I want to address that as well as I can, which is, first of all, I just want to thank Rachel and Now again for their deep commitment and support in our doing this work. And I want to say that we do not intend to stop doing this work, and we will continue to provide the trainings and and to support people who are doing trainings, and to provide and update the curriculum, and that is our intention to keep moving forward. I also, at the same time, recognize that there are people and places for whom this might not be really safe work to do right now. And we understand that. And if there are ways that we can support, that we will. Neither the United Church of Christ nor the Unitarian Universalist Association can give legal advice to our local congregations. That's something that you need to seek out in your local area, because there's such a different climate depending on where you are right now, in terms of legalities. And so far, our faith communities are places where we are allowed to do ministry, and we are allowed to do our ministry, which Our Whole Lives is a ministry.
Mhm.
So, and I understand that that is not a place that people feel, some people are safe to do right now. So, yeah.
And I would suggest that when COVID happened, when the lockdown, well, it's still happening, but when the lockdown happened, and people were asking, what can we do? But can we do? We started these webinars, Owl Taking Flight, to help support that. And one of the things that we learned even though we provided some suggestions for touching on our whole lives during the lockdown, what we found most congregations wanted to do was just create a safe online space and allow conversations to happen, allow supportive ministry to happen that wasn't necessarily trying to teach a curriculum, but that was answering questions and engaging youth in conversations. And that may be something that you can do in the meantime while you're deciding next steps, if you're in a place where you don't feel safe offering our whole lives.
May I weave in a thought? I want to acknowledge that, someone in the chat says the so far part is scary. Yes, it is scary to be in this moment, to not know what the future is, to not know what laws would look like. And the both and still has room to be. As a queer person, as a trans non-binary person, I'd be remiss to say I'm not terrified. Yet, just like we've participated in this dialogue today, I remember my ancestors. I remember that my queer ancestors made a way through, that they found spaces to meet in, to share resources with each other, and to teach one another. And we are committed to doing that work, whatever that may look like. The church has been evolving for as long as you can see in the biblical canon or onward, right? And so we get to evolve with it. And something that's comforting to me, at least in my faith tradition, is the church started at a table. Jesus broke bread and offered wine to friends. And my encouragement in the scary moments is to keep doing that and to keep leaning into the community that you have through our whole lives, because we are required and asked within, at least in my faith and UCC thinking, to show up and act justly, to offer grace and mercy. And we can still do that, even in the liminal space and in the so far, not yet, not sure, because those before us did, and they have a lot to say about how we can do it right now too. So I just want to say yes, and I see you, I love you, and we will get through this together by showing up and committing to doing the work of our whole lives.
Amen. Amen. And also, I'm just reminded to, I can't remember where I was, and somebody had this reminder in our faith tradition, Jesus didn't heal everybody. And so, we don't have to do everything. We can't, any one of us cannot do every single thing to fix this or change this. And what can we do? Let's do what we can do. And for some of us, that may be speaking publicly on a webinar. For some of us, that may be continuing to quietly offer our whole lives in our congregation in a very, in a place where that may not be welcome publicly. For others of us, it may be discussing the possibility of other people offering OWL and going to a training in your congregation or community. So, so please know that we are all here, sincerely loving you all, sincerely holding you all in love and light, and so grateful for each and every one of you. Okay, Melanie, I gotta turn it over to you because I'm gonna cry.
So we want to thank our guests today, Anne and Judith and Rachel and Now, for being with us and sharing your stories and the mission that we all share. And thanks to everybody who's listening live or recorded. I want to end this with a reading from OWL for the Sexuality and Our Faith for OWL for Older Adults by Alex Capitan, called A Meditation on Opposites, which I chose because of the legislation or the executive orders relating to trans and non-binary folks. Spirit of the universe, life force that flows through all beings, power beyond our knowing, we ask you to help us see beyond our dependence on opposites, to transcend our desire to know who is like us and who is not. Open us to the knowledge that in this room there are complexities and diversities of identities beyond black and white, older, young, woman and man, poor and rich, uneducated and educated, disabled and able-bodied, gay and straight, ill and healthy, right and wrong, broken and whole. In this room, there are people who embody juxtaposition, who can tell stories written on their bodies about both and neither, who carry intimate pieces of the truth that there is no such thing as opposites. Spirit of many names and of no name at all, help us find release from our belief that all things must be either or. This belief that walls us off from one another, ensnaring us in a battle of same versus different. Help us to open our minds, to deeply listen, and to truly know one another, finally glimpsing the kaleidoscopic beauty of the divine. Blessed be.
Thank you all. May you all lean into your communities and focus on unity and care for one another and yourselves. Take care, and we will be back next month.